Because obviously one thing that makes polyamory different from monogamy, in theory, is that you are having sex with multiple partners, but it's not just about sex.
Thanks for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.
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 It's not all about sex.
It's not all
about the sex.
It's not all
But it's
about
not
the
just
sex.
about sex.
Thanks
But
for
it's not
listening,
just
and
about
remember,
sex. But it's not
It's
just
not
sex.
all
But
about
it's
the
not
sex.
just about
This is not the video I planned on making. I mean, this video is planned, and certainly I sat down and wrote a script and made a conscious decision to make it, but it has gone in a bit of a different direction than what I expected. Normally I like to make my videos engaging with creative flair, things like fun costumes and little tastes of leftist cook-esque plot involved. I make jokes. I dissect capital S society's assumed norms surrounding relationships and romance. I do quirky theater girl shit. Bread tube, baby. Okay, I'm still making jokes, obviously, and we can't pretend like there aren't still some theatrics happening in this video. But I couldn't write this script in the way that I was supposed to. The first time I sat down to write a significant part of the script, I ended up just writing a 3-page rant. Reading some of the screenshots that you'll be seeing later in this video made me physically ill at times. And I kind of felt like I had to purge that illness here in the only manner that I could think of. This isn't the video I planned on making, but then again, it also isn't really a video essay. This is a rant. This is a scream into a void known as YouTube. This is a personal diary entry. This is about me. This is me telling you all how kink shaming and slut shaming within the polyamorous community makes me feel. Not Mainely Mandy, the YouTuber once described as one commenter as being the polyamorous Abigail Thorne, something which will be going on my gravestone, by the way. But me, Amanda, the person. Yeah, using the real name, you know shit's getting real now. And warning, there is going to be some actual screaming and yelling in this video. If you don't like that, you can of course mute the video and have captions on, or you can skip this one. I'll see you all next time. This, whatever you want to call it, will at times contain some very non-advertiser friendly words. Words like kink and sex and kinky sex. I will at times be frank, though not graphic, about my own sexual experiences and proclivities. I'm also going to be discussing a few unfortunately related subjects, including harassment, sexual assault, misogyny, and sex trafficking. There's also going to be a couple of examples of transphobia, specifically misgendering. It's very likely that this video is going to end up being limited or demonetized outright. I could make a big deal here about how big and brave I am, about how I don't really care, something like that. But the fact is, I can really only afford hits like that because of my Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/mainlymandy. My Patreon supporters do a lot to keep the lights on, quite literally, as well as make sure that myself and my cats are fed. If you have any money that you can spare, I would certainly appreciate that financial help. While things are definitely more stable than they were back when I had just left my previous job, I still did see a huge cut to my income. Also important to remember that winter isn't that far away, and I live in a basement, so my heating bill can get kind of up there.
Winter is coming.
So to start off, let's talk about the incident that inspired this video, or rather incidents as it were. I know, incidents? Plural? How ominous. On October 9th, 2021, Leanne Yao of the Polyphilia account shared a screenshot of a tweet. This in itself isn't very newsworthy. Polyphilia is constantly resharing tweets or else sharing screenshots of those tweets across her social media. These posts get hundreds, if not thousands, of reacts, shares, as well as comments. The tweet on October 9th said,
"Anyone who's against polyam because I could never share my partner / be shared by my partner has clearly never been passed around by their partner at a party for everyone to use. Because, let me tell you, Sharing never gets better than that.
Hey, I see what they did there. They took that thing that monogamous people sometimes say to polyamorous people, and they turned it into a little joke, a little sexy joke. I get it. But to some people, this was a lot more than a little joke, and they made their displeasure known.
Things everyone uses in my home. Tissue, the toilet, the computer, stairs. Things people don't use in my home. People.
This made me want to cry.
Oof. I'm sorry y'all have partners that treat you like objects. Hope you can work past that and develop some self-esteem.
This is why I don't go to poly meetups. So many people like you can't keep your kinks to yourself, and you make the rest of us too uncomfortable and frankly creeped out to feel safe sticking around. Poly has nothing to do with your fetishes.
This sounds a lot like, how do you know you're a lesbian if you've never been with a man? Allow people to decide their own sexual preferences without saying that they'll never know unless they try.
What? I'll admit, when I saw that there was some commotion over this tweet, I was very confused. I try to be understanding and open to learning ways that some, gap of my experience and knowledge has made me blind to something and caused it to fly right over my head. But as I kept reading the responses, I realized that this wasn't about trying to fill in and make someone notice a potential blind spot. This was something else.
Why do people make everything about kink? Polyam doesn't mean interested in fucking kink.
This is the saddest thing I've read today.
I'm polyam, and this ain't it.
This wasn't about trying to call in on a potentially bad-worded tweet, although at least a few people tried to make that claim. This was calling out somebody who was kinky and promiscuous, who admitted openly that they enjoyed being handled in an undignified way. Someone who initially shared that tweet on their personal Twitter page, by the way, but some people seem to not really care about that particular detail. Nor did Leanne reminding people that this was her page first and a polyamorous resource second either. But we'll circle back later to Leanne and her responses to this. The second incident was 10 days later on October 19th. And the circumstances were extremely similar. A tweet about being both polyam and slutty being shared by Luann Yao on her various accounts. This one said,
"One of the best things about being bi, polyam, and slutty is having sex with friends. If a friend of mine is like, damn, this sucks, I haven't been laid for weeks, and I can be like, I got you covered."
Like with the previous tweet, when I saw this, I didn't really think that much about it. If anything, I might have related to this one a little bit more because, and we'll talk about this later, I have had sex with friends before. Not to brag or anything. Being passed around at a party isn't really something that I'm that interested in. Group sex just isn't my bag. On the other hand, helping out a horny friend in need because we're both into it sounds kind of like a Tuesday to me. So imagine my surprise when I see a bunch of people on Facebook and Instagram are saying, well, stuff like this.
Helping out with sex sounds very not good.
Your life shouldn't revolve around sex. What a sad existence.
Fuck this.
Sex has too much meaning to me now than before. Sex, just for sex, lost its value and made me feel like it was all I was good for. I mean, even being poly, I like to keep some standards. That's just me.
This sounds great. I have the wrong friends, apparently.
Friends are not a sexual resource to be exploited. Unwanted advances make people very uncomfortable and can feel unsafe. You have the wrong friends because they won't fuck you? That sounds incredibly incel. Do they know you feel that way?
Y'all need Jesus. The conclusions being made and the hidden deeper context that was being speculated at was actually much harsher this time around. Many were convinced that the first tweet was somehow implying that one being polyamorous is also synonymous with enjoying kink and group sex. But the second one implied, supposedly, something far worse.
Way to announce that you're a predator who preys on your friends' insecurities.
That's great if you have that sort of dynamic established with your friends, but you don't have to be a prude to see the many ways in which this could backfire. Your friends may be deeply uncomfortable with your sexual advances if they were under the assumption that they were free to vent without being put on the spot like that. Alternatively, they may only go through with it only to feel like they've been taken advantage of, or simply pitied for their perceived desperation.
We're basically being painted as sexual predators here, and it is all this bad polyam's fault. Definitely on OP, and not on some wild, out of left field misreading of this tweet or anything. It's also worth noting that the second person received a lot more criticism, that I saw anyway, on their physical appearance.
I would pay money not to have sex with this dude. Why is it always people who look like that?
You're not wrong.
I can't focus on this aspect for too long because there's a lot to cover, and honestly there's a lot that I could say alone about the way that a person's supposed attractiveness can like play into online discourse and how they're treated. But one thing, commenting on someone's looks when you don't agree with what they're saying is never necessary. Equating attractiveness with morality is shitty, full stop. Basically, I'm asking all of you to criticize Trump for being Trump and not for being fat. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Regardless, multiple moral judgments were being made on both of these people, often using language that was extremely frustrating, cruel, and honestly just plain disgusting.
That's a lot of words for I don't like myself.
Imagine your standards being this low.
You're goddamn right, I've never been passed around at a party. TF? Vomiting emoji! Vomiting emoji!
This was slut shaming through and through. This was, putting it really fucking plainly, some good old fashioned misogyny. We like to think we're better than that, don't we? Here on the left in our polyam discussion groups, and of course on twitter.com/billionairedaddynoticeme.gov. We like to think that we've evolved past it, but honestly, it's still very much relevant in our communities and in the way that we discuss this stuff. I've had a few conversations with fellow terminally online friends like myself, women folk like me, about how sometimes dealing with the unchecked misogyny on the left can be really frustrating to deal with. While being polyamorous doesn't automatically align one with progressive values, see my video on polyamorous enlightenment to learn more, there is still this assumption about it having higher morals and standards. We're all about honesty and loving people. We must be the goods, right? And yet, I can tell you that I personally have been involved in situations in which polyamorous men have made me deeply uncomfortable, messaged me without permission, harassed me, harassed other women, sometimes doing so for months on end before somebody in a position of power in the shared spaces that we occupied finally stepped in to do something about it. Oh, and even after that happened, there was still a lot of hand-wringing about, oh, well, we gotta make sure that this poor guy still has community. I'm sorry if this is difficult for you to hear, but based on my own experiences, the experiences of my friends and loved ones, the many I have seen documented over social media over the past 5 years, and definitely because of the existence of one Franklin Vivo, we are not better than the monogamous. We really aren't. Look at both of these tweets. What are they actually saying? Like really, let's break this down. Okay, so the first tweet is talking about a pretty common phenomenon a lot of non-monogamous people experience, which is when we bring up being polyamorous in some way, and then without being prompted, the other person will tell us why they could never be non-monogamous. Usually in scenarios where we in no way implied that they should be, but anyway. In this tweet, the excuse being used is, I don't like to share, which is a little strange. It kind of hints at a weird possessiveness on the part of the person speaking, plus it's kind of synonymous with the old I'm too jealous trope. So then OP gets a little sassy, a little risque, talking about the act of sharing a human, themselves in this case, in a group scenario. Ooh, kink has entered the chat. OP goes on to say that there's nothing better than being shared. It's great, which is pretty subjective, right? Like, there could be lots of things better than that. But that doesn't really matter, does it? This is just their opinion that they're expressing. Y'all, this tweet isn't saying that the only way to be polyamorous is to be into groups sharing scenarios. Nor is it saying that someone not being polyamorous is only because they don't like kinky group scenarios. Or, and this is most important, being serious in any way. It's essentially the equivalent of me saying, You all say that bisexuals have choice overload, but I can't help it that everybody's so hot. Like, I get tone can be very difficult to get over the internet sometimes, and neurodivergent people in particular can already have a struggle with social cues. But like, this still feels like a really deliberate misreading to me. Now, I don't want OP to get a fresh pile of dogpiling, so I won't be, sharing any, like, revealing information, showing their username or their face. But what I can tell you is that having followed them now for a little while, they do quite regularly talk about kinky experiences that they're into. And it sounds like they quite regularly do things like check-ins and boundary setting and, all the healthy things that typically go into healthy kink. Also, OP did say that this is happening at parties, which in itself implies like a lot of consent and that everyone that's entering into the situation knows what's going on, which is going to be very important to remember later on. Now, let's look at the second tweet. OP lists off 3 things that they are: slutty, polyamorous, and bisexual. OP then goes on to say that one of the best things about having all of these identities is that it can allow them to have sex with friends. They say if a friend of theirs is lamenting a lack of sex, they can help them with that. The if and the can are very important words in this sentence because it helps to make it clear that this is conditional. It's an option, but not the only one. They could offer to help their friend, or they might not. There's still definitely room in that sentence to extend the possibility of the friend saying no. The can is specifically an acknowledgement that because of their identities, they are in a position where such things are possible. It's a bit like me saying, because I have weekends off, if I wanted to, I can go to the gym. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do it. Most of the time I don't. Nowhere in this sentence is there any indication that OP would take advantage of a friend just for mentioning not having had sex in a while. Nor is there any indication that they wouldn't have the self-awareness to know which of their friends would be open to such advances. There is nothing to indicate that they would be pushy or fail to read the body language of said friend. None at all. I guess you can argue that OP doesn't explicitly say they wouldn't do those things, but I don't think that's a particularly strong argument. Like, there's a lot you could decide about a person based on a tweet where they didn't say something. This tweet about a broccoli recipe does not in any way indicate whether or not he jerks off all over those broccoli first. Ergo, I bet he does. Just a bunch of jizzy little trees. So to recap all of this more succinctly, or my too long didn't watch. First tweet, sometimes I enjoy being shared sexually. Second tweet, sometimes I have sex with friends. Wow. What monsters? Nowhere in either of these tweets is anyone saying that this is the one true way to do polyamory and that's final. No one is saying you have to do these things to do pure, untainted, cage-free polyamory. Now, something that my script advisors did bring up is that both of these tweets were reshared by a large polyamorous influencer. That might imply a kind of endorsement from her, a promotion of what she believes are the true ways to practice polyamory. And that is a pretty fair point. If I saw Abigail Thorne retweeting somebody saying that the best way to make video essays is to cover yourself in peanut butter, do all of your dialogue in a funny accent, and stand in a bucket full of ladybugs, I'd be like, chunky or smooth? The thing is, though, Leanne shares a multitude of experiences relating to polyamory and non-monogamy. She's even admitted before that she sometimes retweets and shares things that she knows her followers are like, even though they're not exactly things that resonate with her personally. While there are many things that she retweets that she does enjoy, some of them she doesn't. Instead of seeing her retweeting and sharing as implying this is the one true way to do polyamory, it might be better to think of it more like, here is one way to do polyamory that I find interesting and is valid. There's probably a larger conversation here about, the influence that larger creators have, their responsibility to their audiences, as well as something about parasociality, but that's a lot to unpack right now, and I'm trying to keep this video focused. Kinda. Interestingly enough, you know who did have a lot to say about what does or doesn't qualify as real polyamory? The people in these comments judging both of these tweets.
I think those of us who don't vibe with this is because this describes more of a sexual kink and not an inherent part of polyamory.
The desire for group sex doesn't make one polyam any more than being polyam means you want to have group sex. This is not a poly thing, this is just a free spirit thing, lol. Sex is not taboo to some people. They enjoy it and embrace it and promote it on all fronts. Laughing emoji. This type of person may not be able to commit to one person long term, let alone 2, 3, 4.
I saw a few comments in particular that insisted this wasn't polyamory at all, but was in fact either an open relationship or ethical non-monogamy.
I guess I just felt like this perpetuates what I view as the incorrect stereotype that being polyamorous meant we could just sleep around, which is not conversely true for everyone. I understood the distinction to be poly is relationship-based, where open is more sex-based.
You're not wrong at all. It definitely sounds more like open relationship than poly.
This screams ethical non-monogamy to me, and I think that's potentially damaging to the already bad rep poly gets in the world. Having multiple sexual relationships when it's convenient isn't poly to me. Having sex with your friends when they're horny does not a relationship make. If it is, then why not say you're fucking your friend and not one of your partners? People like to conflate the two, and they really are just not the same.
Nope. This isn't poly. That's ethical non-monogamy. Fucking your friends when they need to get laid is not an accurate representation of poly. Polyamory is having multiple meaningful romantic or love connections. She's just bi and slutty, which is absolutely fine, but don't toss in poly in there like that's what poly people do. I do not fuck my friends, and I never will. They are friends, not lovers, and that's not poly.
If anybody who wrote any of these comments is watching this video by any chance, I got a couple of questions for you. Why do you think you know these people's relationships better than them? Why are you all trying to divide non-monogamy so neatly instead of acknowledging the way it can be multifaceted and complicated? Like, even in monogamy, there are lots of different ways to do it. Why would polyamory be any different? Fucking friends doesn't exclude one from being polyamorous. Like, they don't take away your credentials if you do. Also, there are some people who don't experience strict distinctions between friends and romantic partners. Granted, that is usually more aligned with relationship anarchy rather than polyamory, but still, such people do exist. And last question, why are you all making this so weird?
Wish you weren't so fucking awkward, bud.
People can have multiple loving relationships and also fuck buddies. These are not mutually exclusive concepts. I myself am living proof of this. I have a buddy who I have been, how do I put this delicately? Screwing, giving blowjobs to, bumping uglies, doing that bump and grind to, over a decade now. And after a decade, I would like to report that the sex is fantastic and the only thing keeping me sane right now. They also have a couple of romantic partners, including a wife. I have a long distance partner. How is any of this confusing? And even if it is, why do you care? How does this affect you in any way? Also, you're wrong. Ethical non-monogamy is an umbrella term that includes many types of non-monogamy underneath it, including polyamory. So could you maybe stop telling people they qualify for one and not the other? The desire to separate and designate true polyamory, the real kind or whatever, could be coming from a few different places, but I do think a major contributor could be the way that mainstream media has a very hard time differentiating between swinging and polyamory. In the media, these words are often used interchangeably. Look at the 3rd season of You. And I think sometimes this need to distinguish polyamory from swinging goes way too far. People begin speaking about swinging as if it's just sex, ignoring the actual emotional and very real connections that can be a part of that lifestyle. Also, some people are polyamorous and swingers, like Leanne Yao, for example. There is no one true way to do poly. Swinging is also a valid form of non-monogamy. Our community needs to stop being so eager to throw swingers, our fellow non-monogamists, even if they aren't polyamorous too, under the bus. It became clear to me as I was reading that the anger and concern was coming from a place of personal feelings. Interpreting the tweets and both tweeters' intents based on their own experiences. So many people kept insisting that there were implications and assumptions being made in these tweets, while actively ignoring or lacking the self-awareness to see the ways that they themselves were doing so. And unfortunately, that does bring me to a difficult part of this video. While I was still trying to desperately understand what was getting under people's skin in regards to the first tweet, I read a few comments that were particularly disturbing. They were sharing stories of abuse and sexual assault, sometimes describing graphic acts of sex trafficking without any content warnings or any kinds of heads up at all. Speaking of warnings, I am about to show those stories on screen and have people read the lines, so if you would like to skip that, jump to this time code.
Personally, I have a real problem with being passed around for everyone to use. That language triggers a lot of uncomfortable experiences I've had in my past.
Reading this just transported me to the time my ex non-consensually passed me around a group to be used while holding my arms behind my back. And it super wasn't fun.
They call it being put on the block where I'm from, and you are not treated well if you're put on the block. In fact, you don't have a choice in the matter. You are nothing to the people who are using you. It's about power. The one passing you around has the power. The people using you have the power, and being used makes you the one who is powerless. Another name for it is gang rape.
Along similar lines, people were sharing stories on the second tweet about entitled friendships and sexual harassment.
Unfortunately, this transported me back to an ex-friend who, when I told them I was poly, asked if I would sleep with them. Zero sexual chemistry, and he was a virgin and wanted teaching. It was creepy, and then he proceeded to get increasingly bitter and jealous of anyone I dated because he felt he should have been next. His words, not mine. To him, poly meant I'd always be up for it with anyone. No. Just no.
And here is where I have to tread very carefully. These stories are horrible. I make no claim to the contrary. When I initially shared my thoughts on social media about this controversy surrounding the first tweet, I actually found out that somebody I know in real life was once a victim of sex trafficking. And the wording of that first tweet, specifically the word use, did trigger them. And I am not the kind of person that feels like it is my place to argue with another person about whether or not they are experiencing the feelings that they say they are. Certainly, I'm not going to argue with somebody about whether or not they were actually triggered. I do think that that word has sadly been watered down and sort of memeified in the way that many specific important terms have. Look at love bombing or gaslighting. But generally speaking, if someone tells me that they've been triggered, I believe them. So I am not here to debate about whether or not people were actually triggered by these tweets. I'm going to instead choose to engage in good faith and accept these at face value. I am going to say something that might rub some people the wrong way. A tweet triggering you does not make a tweet bad. The fact that there are people who have legitimately been used in non-consensual traumatic ways does not then make the reality of people who enjoy consensual objectification wrong. A consensual group sex scenario is not in any way synonymous with gang rape. You having once had a shitty friend who felt they were entitled to you sexually does not make every person out there who does fuck a friend somehow in the wrong. The kind of person who would do that would have found any excuse, flimsy as they may be, to have done that to you. Blaming a slutty poly bi for it is so completely unnecessary and also will do absolutely nothing to ensure such a thing doesn't happen again. At best, what I can agree with is that maybe it would have been smart for both OPs to have put a content warning for kink at the beginning of their tweets. This would have, one, made the distinction of these being consensual agreements maybe a lot more clear, and two, would have also allowed anybody who didn't want to engage with the tweet to move on safely. I am admittedly a bit doubtful that these same people would have been satisfied by such a gesture, but maybe that's just because Twitter has made me jaded. But Mandy, someone out there must be screaming at their laptop. What about the asexuals?
Can we also try to remember that there are plenty of polyamorous people who are asexual?
Ah, yes, the asexuals. Let's talk about them for a minute. There were a few ace and demi individuals chiming up in the comments of these posts.
Maybe it's because I'm ace, but I can't understand how anyone can be that loose with who they share their body with. Isn't that supposed to be a special thing and not a tool?
I am way too demisexual for this, but this equates polyamory with promiscuity, and that sits weird with me. Sure, it can be, but a generalized narrative like that?
But you all know that someone can be asexual and in the wrong, right? Not wrong for being asexual, mind you, but wrong for implying that anyone who isn't only making love is being, quote, too loose with their body. The history of accusing someone, particularly women, of being too loose is closely linked to misogyny and slut-shaming. A person being asexual doesn't make that word choice or that assumption suddenly okay. Likewise, implying that there is anything wrong with being promiscuous, regardless of being demi or not, is not okay. I really hate that I have to say this, but I think implying that somebody is morally superior due to a lack of sex, or perceived lack of sex, and we'll get to that in a minute, is in itself a very toxic idea. It plays into some purity culture stuff, which historically has been used to control women's sexuality. Women have been historically shamed for having sex, the logic being that it somehow degrades us, makes us dirtier. Women who were chaste, the virgins, were seen as morally superior, more pure and innocent than the filthy, degenerate sluts like me. By the way, I do also want to acknowledge that the history of women of color sexuality being treated in different ways is obviously a bit different than what I'm talking about right now, and also very racist. I'm speaking generally in a way that aligns with my own experiences, which obviously comes from being a white woman. So the way that asexual people are being used here as this sort of like defensive shield against counter-arguments doesn't sit right with me. An asexual person not understanding why one would want to fuck a friend or where that desire comes from is totally understandable. I also do think that society, certainly America does anyway, has a tendency to like over-sexualize everything in ways that we might not even really think about or notice most of the time. And an asexual person deciding they don't really want to deal with that totally makes sense to me. But I do have a problem with an asexual person adding on to a dog pile of slut shaming and kink shaming suddenly being acceptable because, oh, well, you know, asexuals are just pure, innocent little sweet babies, don't you know? You can't talk about sex or kink around an asexual or their faces will melt right off like an Indiana Jones. But here's the thing, babes. Not all asexuals are sex repulsed. Some of them do have sex. Sometimes they call themselves slutty. Sometimes asexuals even participate in kink. In fact, there's a YouTuber called Evie Lupine who makes kinky educational content. Evie describes herself as being polyamorous, kinky, and asexual. She also agreed to read over this part of the script so that I could make sure that everything was being worded as mindfully as possible. So, you know, if anyone's a little bit concerned out there, I promise I did have asexual people read this part of the script, not just Evie too. So please, if you don't mind going over to check out her channel later, please do. She's a lot bigger than me, so you probably already subscribed to her. Also, David Bradley, who has made a whole video talking about how some asexuals can be kinky and enjoy sex. In it, David does talk about the way that asexuals are sometimes used as a defensive shield, often without their permission. The actual context of the discussion in the video is kink at Pride, but wow, is it really relevant to this conversation.
I'm sorry, but you have got to stop assuming that all asexuals are sex repulsed, or that sex repulsed people have a problem with others being proud of their sexuality. I see this tied into the discourse every time it comes up. People say that we shouldn't allow kink at Pride because now the aces are here and they don't like it. It is bullshit every time. I hate it for some very specific reasons. First of all, it is never the aces who are saying this. It is always allos speaking over us and infantilizing the community by trying to put us in the same position as the imagined traumatized kids that others are using for their arguments. Never once accepting that we might be capable of making our own decisions and forming our own opinions on the subject. The thing that concerns me the most when I hear this being said, the allos who say it are trying to turn people against asexuals. They know that pride is a very sex-positive thing, and they want to paint us as sex-negative, to pretend like we're the ones who have a problem with this stuff, so that the rest of the queer community will turn on us. It's maybe not as organised as something like the targeted attacks on trans people, but there is a deliberate hostility to it that is trying to split the community apart so that we are easier to silence. Do not fall for it.
And you can find the link to that video as well as all of my other resources that I looked at while I was making this script in my resource document within the description box. I also would like to remind people who are watching this that there are some people who along the spectrum of sexual attraction chemistry are kind of at the opposite end of asexuals. People who do experience it quite strongly, in fact, and even require it before they're able to make a romantic connection with a person. And they are just as valid. It would be just as frustrating for me to see someone scream, "What about the megasexuals?" on a tweet about an asexual person's experiences, as this is all for me. Asexuals are no different than other people in that their mileage on the subject may vary. Some may never have any interest in discussing sex or kink. Some of them might be very interested to hear all about what you got up to one weekend with some close friends and a bucket of butter. It depends on the individual. We can be accepting and accommodating of ace and demis in our community without overcorrecting into outright slut-shaming. So to the question, what about the asexuals? I say, as respectfully as possible, what about them? Evie shared some thoughts I'd like to end this section on.
As an asexual person, I know that everyone, even other ace people, have a diversity of sexual experiences. Some are completely repulsed by sex. Others love it. Others enjoy it with casual friends or only within long-term relationships. Whatever someone's relationship to sex is, it does not invalidate my identity as an asexual person. Other polyamorous people having lots of sex doesn't mean I can't be polyamorous. And while I think it's important to recognize that yes, ace people do exist in non-monogamous spaces, I do not want my orientation to be used as a weapon against people who like having kinky sex or casual hookups. All relationships to sex should be allowed within non-monogamy. Stop it with these silly barriers and purity testing.
Looking at these comments, I see a common thread behind each one, a shared fear behind every word. Did you see it? Maybe a couple more will help you out.
For me, this is the kind of thing that gives people the wrong impressions of what I'm willing to do and or desirous to do, unfortunately.
Did you see it that time?
These statements are harmful to the community, especially because that's the argument monogamous people are consistently using to explain why polyamory is wrong.
Damn, that one was way more on the nose. You saw it, right?
This is not the polyam exposure we want.
And there it is, clear as day. No mistaking that. The real reason, I believe anyway, that so many people were up in arms over these tweets isn't because they were objectively bad, actually. It wasn't out of concern for those who might be triggered by the content or word choices. If so, they would have also put content warnings on their comments before describing in detail sexual assault and gang rape scenarios. No. The real reason why people don't like these tweets is because they think it makes all of us polyamorous people look bad. They're afraid to be associated with people like this. People like me. I am polyamorous and I love to fuck. Not make love. Although, with a certain partner that I have that kind of connection with, that can be nice to do occasionally, but generally speaking, straight up fucking is my go-to. Some polyamorous people don't like me because I prove the stereotype right. The stereotype of the sexual deviant polyamorous kinkster who goes to orgies and doesn't just pursue long-lasting romantic love. Because for me, sometimes it is about the sex, about not having limitations on what I can do or who I can do it with. And that section of the polyamorous community is not the only group that I am currently disappointing. I am also, as I think is pretty obvious at this point, a bisexual. Some bisexuals hate me because I'm polyamorous, because there are stereotypes that bisexual people have to be polyamorous in order to be fulfilled. We have to have multiple loving relationships with multiple genders in order to be satisfied. Else we will cheat, we will lie, we will manipulate, and make miserable everybody that we supposedly love. So goes the theory. But the issue with stereotypes is that they exist. Not that some people happen to fit into them. Somebody proving a stereotype correct does not lend credit to that stereotype existing, nor does it reflect badly on the person who just happens to fill it. If somebody meets a person who fits into a stereotype and then decides that that means the stereotype is true, that makes that person shitty. Like, we all know this, right? There's a stereotype that all lesbians drive Subarus, which of course isn't true. Some of them drive pickup trucks that they inherited from their uncles. Where I live here in Maine, a lot of people have Subarus. It's kind of the unofficial car of Maine. People get them because they're generally have like good mileage. They do very well in winter months, which is important considering how many months of winter we do have here in Maine typically. And also they're, you know, kind of cute depending on who you ask. And some of those Mainers with Subarus are lesbians. So do those lesbians make all the other lesbians who don't drive Subarus look bad? No, of course not. That's fucking ridiculous. And it's the same in this situation too. In fact, the link between kinky polyams giving the rest of the polyams a bad name and bisexual polyams giving the rest of the bisexuals a bad name saw a very real overlap in these comments.
Hi, bisexual here. We don't fuck everyone. Please stop pushing that stereotype. Thanks.
I feel this is one of the damaging myths about bi-polyam people that I am forever trying to break. No, we're not all out here to have sex with anyone just because. We're not here to service others. Some of us are here for multiple loving relationships, hence the polyamory, not just the polyfuckery.
Polyfuckery, yep. Polyamorous people really like to put the word poly in front of any old word, don't we? Sorry, not sorry that a stereotype I didn't invent is one I just happened to fit into due to no fault of my own. Seems like we should just be doing more to make all types of like healthy relationships that are, you know, safe and consensual and loving to be accepted rather than creating like stricter boundaries about what is okay and what's not within our community. But whatever, you go ahead and wave your pitchfork at me if you really think that's what's gonna help us finally gain acceptance in the mainstream, sweetie. Another important aspect of the story is the identities of all parties involved. Now, as I said before, I'm not going to reveal the names or the faces of either OP, but what I can tell you is that both of them are trans femme and queer. So all of this dogpiling was essentially slut-shaming to publicly out kinky trans people, which also makes the comments about the second person's appearance all the more disturbing. As for Leanne herself, she is an autistic queer Asian woman. Now, I don't believe a person's identity means that they can't cause harm. Autistic people, queer people, people of color, all are of course capable of hurting others. But I do find it frustrating and alarming how often marginalized people are held to much higher standards of morals than their straight, white, often male and neurotypical counterparts. Being other in public spaces will always make you a target of scrutiny and of abuse, just by way of being who you are. At a time when trans people are facing literal genocide, to see two publicly out trans femme queer people being equated to sexual predators and called disgusting was truly horrific. Every last person who did that and contributed to it should be ashamed of themselves. I think personally Leanne handled all of this very well, certainly better than I would have. I mean, look what I'm doing right now. In one of her comments regarding the backlash to the first post, she said,
I find it very telling that most of my posts aren't relatable to every single polyamorous person in existence, but I don't get parallel polyamorous objecting to my kitchen table polyamory content, or solo polyamorous objecting to the post discussing nesting and marriage. People only seem to kick up a fuss the moment a post alludes to something sexual or kinky. Some of us are kinky polyamorous. Some of us enjoy group sex as part of the way we love multiple people. To say this isn't polyamory is simply being sex negative, and some of you need to check yourselves.
The polyamorous community is vast. No two relationships are going to look exactly the same. One person's experiences with polyamory that they seem as sort of inherently part of it is obviously not going to resonate with everybody else. And having that expectation is, in my humble opinion, very silly. And let's also remember we are talking about tweets which do have character limits. Making a tweet which expresses a polyamorous experience while also acknowledging every counterexample or possible exception is literally impossible. Somewhere in here is probably a conversation about like internet discourse, online dogpiling, and like cancel culture in general, but like smarter people than me have talked this subject to death, and I don't feel like touching it. One of the more hurtful things that some people assume about non-monogamous folks is that we are more prone to disease. Monogamous people will often, in their concern trolling for polyamorous people, bring up STIs, you know, as if non-monogamous people have literally never thought of those before or factor that into their safer sexual practices. And by the way, if anyone watching this is concerned about that, trust me, most non-monogamous people I know are more on top of their status than your mom on Facebook. I think the desire to uncouple polyamory from being inherently sexual comes from a few places. One is to just not be seen as deviant, to be accepted as part of the club. Wanting to be seen, valued, and accepted is a deeply human emotion. Plus, it's a survival instinct. Being part of the group has literally helped us to survive. Polyamorous are often seen as being lesser, as being weirdos just by way of being polyamorous. The desire to be accepted can cause some of those who are not so outside of the norm, those who aren't, you know, kinky freaks like me, to differentiate themselves. Those are the kinky weirdos you want, officer, not me. No, I am just a loving, simple, non-monogamous trad wife who won't do more than hold hands with someone new for the first 6 months that we're dating. Another is the desire to no longer be seen like this, as diseased. Being queer, I empathize with that a lot. I mean, I wrote this script at a time when a virus is being incorrectly linked specifically to queer people. Something we definitely have never seen in history ever before this. So maybe you can imagine how it felt to see people in my own community saying things like this.
Learn some boundaries and how to express them before you riddle yourself with venereal diseases. Jesus.
STD City.
Sounds like STDs to me.
No. We're not better than the monogamous. If anything, we're worse. We should know better. We should be working to make all members of our community accepted and validated, and yet this is how we're spending our time. I'm sure at least one person watching this has thought to themselves, okay, but like, why care so much what a bunch of strangers on the internet think? I mean, you get enough people together, some of them are bound to have some shitty opinions, but like, these are strangers. Why care? Well, I never said they were all strangers. These 2 comments were written by somebody that I know. We're not close or great friends. We're more like online acquaintances, really. But still, we've interacted a few times, and I would say, generally speaking, we're on pretty friendly terms. And when I saw them adding their voice to the misreading, the dogpiling, the shaming, I was honestly heartbroken. I almost responded, wanting to confront them about what they had said. I wanted to ask them if they believed that. If they believe that someone like me makes the polyamorous community as a whole look bad. I wanted to ask, is this how you're treating people in our community?
What a sad existence.
Always people who look like that.
This is how you're treating us?
The saddest thing.
Vomiting emoji!
This is what you think of me?
You're a predator who preys on your friends' insecurities.
That sounds incredibly incel.
This isn't
I can't.
poly.
This is too much.
STD
I feel exactly
City.
the way I did in October.
Gang rape. It was creepy.
You riddle yourself with venereal diseases.
Can be that loose.
Being told that I know better than any of the men who harassed me or assaulted me, or the friends who did become creepy to me the second they thought a sexual relationship was possible, even when I didn't want any of that.
And not an inherent part of polyamory.
This is not a poly thing.
This isn't poly.
Being touched without permission, being dismissed for having big tits.
Not just the poly fuckery.
It's supposed to be better here, but it's not. It's the same. It's the same misogyny, the same slut shaming, the same bullshit. I mean, how the fuck am I supposed to deal with this?
And develop some self-esteem.
I mean, it's one thing to have it from, monogamous people who are committed to not understanding me, but from you, from someone in my own community who I thought I could trust?
This isn't poly.
Sounds like STDs to me. Sounds like STDs to me.
Just bi and slutty.
You know what? I am. Fuck, does it make me happy? In the past almost 5 years now since declaring myself non-monogamous, I have consistently had the best sex of my life. I am more honest and comfortable with my sexual partners than I've ever been. I can tell people what I like. Legs, green. And what I don't. Feet, red. So red, my dude. I am better at check-ins or stopping things when I can tell that something doesn't feel right. I have fucked, sucked, licked, and flicked so many parts of the human body. I've chained people up, poured wax on arching backs, and made them beg for more. Sometimes I've felt the jolt of a crop or had a nice shiver go down my spine when someone whispers "good girl" in my ear. The joys of being a switch. I have dated men, women, and non-binary folks. Found in love with a few of them too. And while most of those relationships didn't last a particularly long time, they were still meaningful. And I think I've still maintained pretty good relationships with all of those people since de-escalating things. Not something I can say for all my monogamous exes. I think it's really helped me to understand and explore my queerness as well. I feel more right about my sexuality these days because I can explore connections and those who catch my interest who are outside of cis-normative and heteronormal ideas of relationships. Polyamory has improved my life, both romantically and sexually. So, with as much respect as I am able to say it with, those within our community who are currently promoting sex negativity needs to go fuck themselves. Sex positivity is the idea that however you do or don't want to have sex, as long as you're being honest and safe and conscientious, should be accepted. It sometimes means making allowances and space for fetishes or kinks that you're not into. Please note that I am saying allowing for and making space, not participate. That's something else. I mean just accepting that it's somebody else's cup of tea. I once dated a foot fetishist and I hate having my feet touched, as has been now established a few times on this channel. It can also mean making space for people who never, under any circumstances, want to have sex. That's it. That's the whole fucking concept. Pretty fucking simple, huh? It's so simple that even me, some random weirdo in southern Maine, who once spent an embarrassingly long part of my life thinking that the lyrics in When the Doves Cry went, "Maybe I'm just like my mother, she never sat inside," can figure out. There is literally no reason for the asexuals or the furries or the sex repulsed or the kinksters to be at each other's throats. It is completely unnecessary, fabricated bullshit. Also, it's completely silly because these categories can overlap significantly. There are sex repulsed kinksters because sex and kink aren't necessarily related. There are ace furries. Deal with it. I am a slut. I am the sluttiest slut who ever slutted. I am also bisexual and polyamorous. I wear all of these identities with pride. And you've got some fucking nerve to think you can come in here and shame me for that. This slut thinks aces are hella cool. I even think it's fine if you want to wait till marriage to have sex. So long as it's not like wrapped up in like purity culture stuff or, lies about how biology works. I refuse to be pitted against anyone without my permission. And I sure as hell won't sit idly by while you all hide behind asexuals. I would have a smidge more respect for you cretins if you had the balls to at least tell me to my face you personally find me disgusting, rather than hiding behind this faux concern about the comfort of aces. A group of people, by the way, you would fail to recognize under any other circumstances other than a potential gotcha. Fucking pathetic. I am a slut. Sometimes I like to be used. Sometimes I use other people. Oh, and they definitely come back for more. I have standards that maybe don't resemble what yours are, and yeah, I guess it's possible I am looser with my body, whatever the hell that means. But that doesn't make you better or me dirtier. What are you gonna say to me? Oh, you're too promiscuous. Oh, you fuck everything that moves. Wow, look at that misogyny you've got there. You go ahead, honey, and keep telling yourself that you're better than the monogamous and the swingers and the filthy, dirty sluts like me. You're not fooling anybody. And in case you're wondering, I'm angry because it took me so fucking long to get here. So long. We are talking a history of abuse, of sexual assault and harassment, some of which came at a very young and terrifying time of my life. We're talking about growing up in central fucking Maine in the 90s and all the oppressive cis heteronormative bullshit that comes with it. Do you have any idea how difficult it can be to see yourself as a sexual being, as a plus-size person growing up in a blatantly fat-phobic country? That alone is worthy of fucking applause. I have fought so hard to get here, and yet I still have to fight. I have to fight for even a basic level of respect and bodily autonomy in my own fucking country. Oh, sorry, little lady, can't have you be in charge of your uterus. We'll be doing that for you from now on. Jesus Christ. And make no mistake, the same people who are looking down at polyamorous sluts, the ones who will hate every second of this video, and definitely this part of it, are the same ones sanitizing queer relationships, trying to erase our history. Related! Kink belongs at Pride. Don't like it? Don't fucking go! I fought to get to a place where the way that I love and the way that I fuck work for me. And you think you get to tell me that I'm wrong? Who the fuck are you? You know, in a way, I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you can't see the ways that kink can be amazing and healing and wonderful and playful and silly. You see a tweet about being passed around at the party and immediately jump to gang rape scenarios. I look and think about a circle of loving partners and friends. If you don't think that someone could find it exceptionally helpful to have an experience where they can indulge in a fantasy like that in a safe environment with a group of people who are all committed to making sure everybody is healthy and safe, that is 100% a you problem. Your lack of imagination is not on us. There's one thing you will never successfully accuse kinksters of. It's a lack of imagination. I wish I could just laugh at you, just needle you a little bit longer and then walk away and live my life. This problem is bigger than me. It's bigger than some malcontents on Facebook. This puritanical rise in sexual attitudes is a direct result in the uptick of nationalist white supremacy-fueled dogma. It is playing into talking points that turn people's lived experiences into topics of debate and speculation. It is respectability politics. Be a good queer. Be a pure polyamorous. Fuck that. And I have bad news for all you good polyamors out there who are only in this for the love and looking down at me and mine right now. Offering up us sluts will not save you. You are just as deviant as me in the eyes of those sorts, and all you are doing right now are erasing more people between them and you. Is that really what you want to be doing right now? You think you can take them alone? It isn't all about the sex is a common phrase that is seen throughout the polyamorous community. It's actually the catchphrase of Polyamory Weekly, the longest running podcast about non-monogamous and polyamorous relationships. That motto, that witty little turn of phrase that we can throw out to non-monogamous when they get a little curious about what's going on behind closed doors, should not be used as a weapon against our own. There is no silent, nor should there be, implied afterwards. It's more like, it isn't all about the sex. For some people. It isn't all about the sex, but it can be. It isn't all about the sex. It's also about late night cuddle sessions and multiple texts from multiple sweeties. It's about custom made collars and licking boots, or sometimes sitting in a chair and just having a bunch of people aggressively compliment you. It's about being on a date with all of your partners at once, or maybe sitting in a hot tub naked with all of your good friends who you would never in a million years fuck. It's about all of this, and sometimes none of it, and that's what makes it so interesting and even glorious. It isn't all about the sex, but it does include it, at least for me. And that doesn't make me any less polyamorous.
Hey everyone, I am literally recording this right after finish editing this video, and whew, I'm tired. I am so sorry this video is not out sooner. It was supposed to be out before the end of last month, and it's not, for a lot of reasons. I honestly just been very busy, so the production time on this one, the turnaround was a little bit slower than I was hoping for. At one point, my brain just stopped working. That wasn't cool. Just straight up, my brain went, nah, we can't do things. And I was like, oh, well, that's not helpful, but that's what happened. One of the days I was going to film, my apartment flooded. That's a thing that happened. Like literally, my apartment flooded. It was very stressful. So yeah, this one was a little tricky to get out to you. So I do apologize for the delay. I want to give a special thank you, of course, to everybody who provided their voices in this video. I got a little ambitious and asked some big heavy hitters. And I was very taken back that people agreed. That was really cool. Thanks everybody. Special, of course, thank you to Evie Lupine, both for giving me her thoughts on the script, and also for that great little ending note there for that one section. That was really, really great. Thank you. And if you're not subscribed to Evie, and especially if you're interested in like kinky education content, I would highly recommend her channel. It's really good. A big, amazing thank you, of course, to all of my supporters over on patreon.com/Mainely Mandy. Usually at the end of my videos, I will read out loud everyone who's at I think it's the $10 and up tier, but I feel bad that a video didn't come out last month. So to make up for it, I'm going to read everybody's names. And in a second, you're going to see why I typically only read the $10 and up crowd, because I am terrible at pronouncing names. But we're going to suffer through this together, because we are. So here we go. Thank you to all my patrons, which include Aaron Lloyd, Alex Brown, Alexander Waters, Angela Ward. That's Walters. That's Waters. What the fuck? I'm not redoing this. Angela Ward, Anna Marie, Art of Paya, Adam Fellows, Austin Tallman, Autumn Delacroix. God, I hope I got that right. Bailey Grevling, Beat Duck, Ben Hengst. Is how you say your last name, Ben? I'm so sorry. Violet, Kaylin Conrad, Chris Franson, Cromie. We'll say Cromie. Dana F., Devin LaFontaine, Emily Armstrong, Eve, Fern, Fruit and Nori, Gabber Laszlo, Gray Person, Harker the Storyteller, Haley ? Haley Williams, Jeffrey Reynolds, hi Dad, Just Us Crickets, Just Another Absol, I hope that's the whole thing, Kay Kinney, what the fuck, what's wrong with my mouth today, don't worry about it, Kevin Cook, Liz Hammond, Michael Marantz, I hope that's right, Nina Felwich, Anana Mouse, Paul O'Shea, Faye Briscoe, Fia Westfall, Polly Amethyst, Quick, Quinn Burkholtz. You think I would know how to say Quinn's last name? Like they've been on my channel before. Anyway, Radish. Oh God, this name. Ronia Adams Ramstead? God, I hope I got that right. This is why I don't usually read all the names, because I'm bad at it. Samantha Quinones? Shira Shirakaru, Psychic, Signan, The Silver Samaritan, Tom Taylor, User, Veronica Duff, Wilhelmina Mosenfelder, hi Wilhelmina, and Zilla's Anthetheum. Anathenium? Am I even saying that right? I can't say words today. Just ignore me. Anyway, thank you all so much for your support. I really appreciate it, and I apologize for butchering everyone's names.
Hey, Mandy, have fun with just me out of context saying STD City in that voice. Just enjoy having that little soundbite for you to use as you please.